they wouldn't let an engineer.
It's 7 o'clock, time for our regularly scheduled meeting. Mike, would you call the roll, please?
Collier Wise. Here. Erickson. Holland. Here. Humphrey. Here. Mines. Here. Price. Here. Sorensen. Here. Ward. Mayor Powell.
Here.
Student Representative Paulson. Here.
Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3, we have minutes from October 2nd regular meeting and October 2nd special meeting.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve both sets of meetings. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Adoption of the agenda. John, we do have one addition to the agenda.
I apologize for the late notice. We did receive a email from the state late today that they would like to have the city council concur with changing the speed limit on South Dakota 50, basically as it passes across the northern portion of the community from 55 to 50. So staff would suggest that under 8C, new business, add concur with DOT proposal to modify Highway 50 speed limit.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other, Mike, any corrections you're aware of? No. Okay.
Approval of the agenda as amended. Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Under visitors to be heard, addressing the council, persons addressing the council shall use the microphone at the podium. Please raise your hand to be recognized, go to the podium and state your name and address. For items that are not on the agenda, members of the public may speak under visitors to be heard on any topic not on the agenda. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes and no decision will be made at this time. For agenda items, public testimony will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item. Public testimony will then be closed and the topic will be given to the governing body for possible action. At this point, only city council members and staff may discuss the current agenda item unless a council member moves to allow another person to speak and there's unanimous consent from the council. Questions from questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the presiding officer at any time. At this time, we do have a proclamation, an Extra Mile Day proclamation. And Tom, please.
This is a proclamation recognizing November 1, 2017 as Extra Mile Day. Whereas the city of Vermillion, South Dakota is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas the city of Vermillion, South Dakota is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas the city of Vermillion, South Dakota is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas the city of Vermillion, South Dakota acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 575 plus extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day, November 1, 2017. Now, therefore, we, the governing body of the city of Vermillion, South Dakota, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2017 to be Extra Mile Day, and urge each individual in the community to take time on this day to not only go the extra mile in her or his life, but to acknowledge all those who are inspirational in their efforts and commitment to make their organizations, families, community, country, or world a better place. Dated in Vermillion, South Dakota, the 16th day of October, 2017.
Thank you, Tom. This resolution will be sent to the national organization recognizing that we have passed this proclamation. Thank you. At this point, Mr. Glenn Pulse. Okay.
Good evening. I got some handouts for the council that I'll pass out. Okay, I'm here tonight on behalf of myself, my wife, and Prairie Sun Organics Farm. We presented this, something similar to the county commissioners at their last meeting. So I'll just kind of read through what I have here, and then I'll take questions. About a week ago, we presented to the Clay County Commission regarding issues of great importance to the city and to people living in a joint jurisdiction area and in the county. It has long-reaching effects for our business and several other Vermillion residents. We're also advised by the County Commission to present this to you so that we could work jointly with the city and the county to come up with a solution. The issues we're talking about did happen inside the joint jurisdiction area. On July 12th, an aerial crop sprayer was flying in the joint jurisdiction area and caused severe damage to our farm and food business, resulting in several federal violations and major non-compliances of the organic regulations, and we are now working to address stuff that it was no fault of our own. The main reason I am here is to bring attention to some serious health issues and safety issues that came out of our $8,200 so far investigation. The state of South Dakota, nor Clay County, nor the city of Vermillion requires aerial applicators in a joint jurisdiction area to carry liability insurance of any kind, nor do they have any guidelines for aerial applicators. This means if an applicator accidentally oversprays toxic pesticides and herbicides onto somebody's front yard, garden, beehives, hobby farm, organic farm, trees, there is no insurance to file against. What about the toxic vapors of mixed chemicals that drift into your house, send your spouse to the hospital, which happened to me, send your dog to the vet, which happened to me? What are the implications if it shuts down a Vermillion business due to federal violations and the EPA is called in to investigate? Who pays for that? So far, I am. Hypothetically speaking, what if one of those applicators crashes with mixed chemicals and causes a financial disaster for the county or the city? You guys would stand the cleanup expense if there's no insurance. And we have many waterways around here. These toxic restricted use pesticides and insecticides are extremely harmful if not properly applied by a professional. And we're not talking about Captain Jack that you can buy off the shelf at Bumgar's. We're talking about professional chemicals here. And I believe we have a civic duty to our fellow constituents in the joint jurisdiction area to bring this to your attention, and that there are federal violations happening now, even as of this week, in the joint jurisdiction area due to lack of oversight at the local level. In brief, aerial applicators may be violating FAA laws, flying within 500 feet of residences, businesses, and people. They are violating EPA laws by applying chemicals not according to the manufacturer's labels, causing 500-foot chemical drifts, chemical fogs and clouds, health and safety risks, and tolerance levels exceeding EPA standards on non-target crops. They are causing many organic farms, including our own, to violate USDA federal regulations by being cited with major non-compliances and effectively shutting down organic farms and businesses in and around a joint jurisdiction area, resulting in shortages of organic food and natural foods to Hy-Vee and farmers market. These restricted use pesticides are also toxic to bees. They kill honeybees. Of note, just in Clay County alone, there's over $1 million worth of honey at a retail value produced in our county alone. There's several honeybee sites and several sensitive crop sites within the joint jurisdiction area also. As you can see, the extent of this problem is huge, and I believe we have a civic duty to correct these deficiencies so that it doesn't happen again to residents within the joint jurisdiction area, Fairview Township, or even Clay County. So my initial proposal for consideration is this: for the city and the county to adopt an ordinance An ordinance for adoption and inclusion of the joint jurisdiction area that provides some basic rules and guidelines for aerial chemical applicators to follow. Register with the county and/or city of Vermillion if they spray within the city limits or the joint jurisdiction areas. Require proof of liability insurance and have it on file with the city. Agree to follow FAA low-flying aircraft rules. Agree to abide by EPA regulations and do not cause an adjacent landowner to violate EPA regulations through drift. Show evidence of pesticide applicator certification and training, which the state does not even require right now for commercial applicators, aerial applicators. They do for ground applicators. Provide evidence of a valid pilot's license. Verify with the state of South Dakota Pesticide Division the previous history of that applicator's non-compliances. And stay within 500 feet from South Dakota registered sensitive sites. Local registration is critically important, as we have learned that aerial applicators are also coming across the border from Iowa and Nebraska and Minnesota and not registering in our state at all, spraying within Clay County. This information was shared to us by the South Dakota Department of Ag. They don't require out-of-state applicators to register with the state. They don't require them to provide proof of insurance, which leaves us liable as citizens. I'm asking the city to do the right thing, work with the county, and help us so that we can have respect for our rights to live peacefully and grow food, healthy food, safe food for our constituents and ourselves living within the regulated jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, anybody? Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Please.
Good evening, Council. Thanks for having us this evening. My name is Damon Elvey. I'm the superintendent here in Vermillion, and I just wanted to express a line of gratitude for the council and the city employees for their help with the school's homecoming activities a few weeks back. We brought back the parade tradition that had been absent for a number of years, and we would not have been able to do that without, of course, the council's support of allowing us to close the streets down momentarily, and of course all the help that the city council members, the city employees, the police department, and all those involved helped with closing the streets and the right-of-ways along the route for our students to keep the parade route safe. So that we wanted to express that this evening, along with all the other partnerships that the city has worked with the school district for, and look forward to more in the future. So thank you on behalf of our school district.
Thank you. I hope we won't wait 32 more years before we have a second one.
We're planning already for next year, so.
It went very well, and it had great participation.
Very good, yeah.
And great crowds along the streets.
Yeah, good weather and everything that just sort of came together for us. And again, thanks for your guys' half of that. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Item 6, public hearings. Item A, a resolution adopting a resolution of necessity for sidewalk repairs, Central Business District. And Jose, please.
Thank you. The city's sidewalk inspection program was first presented to the City Council in 2010. At that time, comments and discussion helped create the program used today. The program divided the city into into 4 quadrants, with the southwest, essentially anything that's south of National and west of Dakota Street quadrant being inspected last in 2013. In 2015, the city amended that resolution, requiring the sidewalks to be repaired by extending that deadline for repairs to 2017. At that time, the city was exploring the option of doing a project along Main Street that would have reconstructed all of the sidewalks rather than undertaking spot repairs on the deficient sidewalks. On October 2nd of this year, the City Council passed a resolution of necessity and notice of hearing, setting the public hearing on the sidewalk repairs for today. Staff is asking the Council to amend the existing special assessment by removing the requirement from the owners to complete the repairs. The city is exploring once again to do a Main Street project that would reconstruct all the sidewalks. If the Main Street project were not to take place, the downtown sidewalks would then be re-inspected in 2018 with repairs occurring in 2020. The property owners were notified by mail and the notice of hearing was published twice in the on the plain talk. Administration recommends adoption of the resolution adopting a resolution of necessity to remove the listed properties for sidewalk repairs.
Thank you, Jose. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this topic? Seeing none, anyone on the council, comments, questions? What's the pleasure of the council? Sure.
Jose, this inspection has already been done once, right? And you just wanted,
Yeah, it was done back in
were
2013.
there any critical areas?
I guess there were two of them. One of them has already been fixed, and the other one, the property owner is aware of the issues. So,
And it will be fixed, I assume.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm concerned, because if, say, we're put off for another year, if it's a critical thing, I'd like to have it addressed now if we could.
Yes, we could ask him to address it now. We could do it as a nuisance. The resolution that would actually be approved, if approved, would actually still require the property owner to repair those spots that are majorly deficient, if you want to call them that.
Great, thank you.
A motion and a second to approve the resolution adopting resolution of necessity for sidewalk repairs for the Central Business District. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, Jose. Item B, a resolution adopting a resolution of necessity for sidewalk repairs northwest quadrant. Jose?
Thank you. Again, similar thing. This time it's dealing, as you mentioned, with the northwest quadrant, so it's anything north of National Street and west of Dakota Street. We did inspect this section this year. We have actually placed, we mailed the property owners a notice of the hearing and also placed it on the published it on the Plain Talk twice. An informational packet has also been placed on the city's website and has been made available to the property owners if they wanted to download it or if they need a copy mailed to them as well. The property owners will be given until June 30th of 2018 to demonstrate they have actually started the work or they have the work contracted. They will be required to file a permit with the city, a no-cost permit, so we are actually aware of which ones will be fixed or who wants the city to complete the sidewalk repairs for them. Using 2017 prices, the cost of all of the repairs was estimated at $33,175. In addition to the construction costs and an administration fee of either 8% or $50, whichever is greater, will be added to the cost. Administration recommends adoption of the resolution, adopting a resolution of necessity for sidewalk repairs.
Thanks, Jose. If they pay it ahead of time, they don't have to see that 8% or $50, is that correct?
Nope, if they pay ahead of time, then there wouldn't be any interest accrued.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Seeing none, council? A motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item C, resolution approving the special assessment roll for sidewalk repairs in the northeast quadrant. Again, Jose, please.
Okay, thanks. This is the one that actually, where we actually complete the project for some of the property owners. The City Council approved the original resolution adopting the resolution of necessity for this quadrant back in 2015. This resolution involved the sidewalks in the northeast quadrant, so anything east of Main Street, north of Dakota Street. Work has been completed and the final payment has been authorized. Special assessment were calculated and filed with the finance officer on September 19th, 2017. At the October 2nd meeting, the City Council approved the resolution setting today as the hearing date for this item. At this hearing, the council can consider any comments offered by the public and either approve, equalize, amend, or reject assessment roll as it sees fit. Construction costs to be assessed are $16,644.04. This assessable value does not include the administrative fee, which is either $50 or 8%, whichever is greater. Administration recommends approving the assessment roll for the sidewalk repairs in the northeast quadrant of the city.
Thanks, Jose. Anyone in the audience wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, council? Motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, Jose.
Thanks.
Item D, Consideration of an application submitted by the Alpha Phi House Corporation Board for a variance reducing the minimum front yard setback from 20 feet to 5 feet for the construction of a parking lot on property located at 619 East Cedar Street. And Jake, please.
So those were a couple of fast items, and I hate to say it, but this one will not be nearly as quick as those ones. So this is a variance. It's been a number of years since we've actually had one of these, and so for the sake of council, some of you have not experienced a variance and myself have not, so I want to do two things. First, just kind of walk through what a variance is, how this process works, and then secondly, touch on what's actually being asked in this specific case. So most of the time, council doesn't touch on most zoning issues other than rezones. It's something that's handled by staff and the planning commission. And our code sets different requirements depending on what zone you're in terms of how tall a building can be, how much parking you need, how far of a setback you have to be from the street or the property line. And so occasionally you might have a lot that has an exceptional reason that it can't be used the way that our code requires, that if we strictly applied that, the lot would be basically useless. And so in those cases, our code allows the city council, acting as the board of adjustment, to allow for variances to change the height, area, setback, yard, parking, or density requirements on a specific lot. And so these are only for those few things you couldn't get a variance to, say, build a factory in a residential zone. It's just how far away from the property line it needs to be or how tall it can be. And when you're doing this, you're supposed to consider the public interest, and so our code says this is considering the public at large within the city and not just the neighboring property owners. And in this process, the burden's on the applicant themselves to prove the need for a variance. Now, our code also sets a couple of factors that you're supposed to consider individually and together, and Don has a couple slides for those that he can put up for us. So the first is proving an unnecessary hardship. And so in this section, an unnecessary hardship means in the absence of a variance, the owner can't do anything reasonable or feasible with the property. And you aren't supposed to consider convenience, loss of profit, financial limitations, or any form of self-imposed hardship. Next slide, please. All right, the second is one I hope you don't ask me too much about, because this is one we don't have any examples of so far, but where the literal interpretation of provisions of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this chapter. Next slide, please. Yeah, glad we got through that fast. The variance requested needs to be the minimum variance that will alleviate the hardship. Next slide, please. Granting the variance will comply with the general purpose and intent of this chapter, will not be offensive to adjacent areas or to the public welfare. No nonconforming use or structure in the same district and no permitted or nonconforming use or structure in another district shall be considered grounds for the issuance of a variance. So just because a non-conforming use exists doesn't mean we need to grant a variance based on that. And next slide, please. All right, so exceptional and extraordinary circumstances apply to the property that don't apply to other properties in the same zone or vicinity, such as lot size or shape, topography, other circumstances. So some lots we have in town, just kind of weird shapes. You couldn't build with the required setbacks. Maybe land's too steep and you can't place things where it should be. So in these cases, we allow for our code to be changed. And so in granting a variance, council, as the Board of Adjustment, can attach conditions to a variance that can be very strict or very loose, whatever you'd like, and staff make sure that those are followed through whenever the building or alteration takes place. So if you have any questions, that's generally how a variance works. Are we understanding it so far? All right, so jumping into this specific case, this summer, Jose and I met with members of the Alpha Phi Corporation Board. They voiced their intention to buy a property, and I have a map here showing where this is at. It's across the street from the Alpha Phi house, across Pine. It's 619 East Cedar. And they voiced to us at that time that their intention was to purchase this property, remove the house, and construct a parking lot for use by their members. So our code classifies this as an off-premise parking lot. It's something that, were they to follow this course, they wouldn't normally need to come before the city council. That's what's called a conditional use, and so the planning commission would look at their plans. If they okayed it, they could go ahead, and council wouldn't see it unless a neighbor decided to file a petition essentially saying that they were harmed by it. So a few months later, we received, a few weeks later, a request for a variance. Even though the parking lot use is fine by our code, the sorority gave us, with the help of their engineering firm, gave us a plan for what the size of parking lot they were intending to build, and I have a picture of that here. So pointing out a few things, and this is, I realize, somewhat confusing. So Yeah, here we are, Cedar Street, Pine Street, in an R2 zone where this is at. A front yard is required to be 25 feet, so every lot has to have a 25-foot space between whatever you're building and the end of the property line. In the case of a corner lot like this, you're allowed to lower one of those front yards down to 20 feet. So at minimum, your front yard needs to be 25 feet on one side and 20 feet on the other. Now in this case, and the numbers are somewhat difficult, the Pine Street setback is proposed to be the same amount, 25 feet here, but it's on the Cedar Street side where the number's been reduced. The memo talks about 5 feet. In this drawing, it's actually 10. You can't see it too well on there. The reason for the discrepancy, and this is an oversight on staff's part and something we need to fix, our request for variance forms actually don't have a space for you to say exactly what variance you would need, so we kind of put in a 5-foot variance as a placeholder. What they have in these plans is a little bit less. And so it's something that will be up for discussion anyway. Council needs to decide if you do grant a variance, if this is the minimum required to alleviate their problems. In their application, Alpha Phi discussed how without the variance, they could build a parking lot of 13 spaces. If they were allowed this variance, they could fit 13 more spaces, bringing it up to 26. And so, and also I should mention, granting or not granting a variance doesn't mean they can't build a parking lot. It would just mean that it could only be one that would be done through conditional use, so the 13 spaces. They could still do that. Whether or not they would choose to pursue that is something I think they can speak to more. Our code does require that staff look at any variance petition and make a recommendation to council or the Board of Adjustment, which you're acting as now. In this case, we looked at the list of determining factors. We would have to say that this doesn't fit those. The lot is being used as it is now. There is a house on it. We understand the sorority wants to do something different. We do find a lot of merit in the project. We understand that Greek housing does have very different parking needs. Staff is just looking at this in the black and white sense. Our code says to look at these factors. We didn't feel like it fit those. And even if staff was recommending approval, you wouldn't have to listen to us either way. So this is something that we can't argue in favor of it, but we are not necessarily opposed to it. If council were to decide that a variance should be granted, we would request for staff's part, it would help if we could have some specific conditions attached to that in terms of, we think it would be helpful to specify that this is only for the Alpha Phi Corporation on this lot for the purposes of building a parking lot, not to just grant a 5-foot setback, because, not that I could see it happening, but you can imagine scenarios where they want to do something else with the lot that isn't a parking lot. So making it as specific as possible would help us out. It will also be addressed at the Planning Commission stages, but if you'd like, you could attach different things about how well screened the property needs to be, what sort of landscaping requirements you'd like to see, if you'd prefer downward facing lights since this is a residential area. And I think with that, I've talked a lot more than I would like to, and I know we have a lot on the agenda, but if you have any questions of me about the variance process in general, I'd be happy to answer those now. If not, I believe we have a number of representatives from the sorority and some other Greek groups, and so feel free to ask them any questions you might like. So I guess for now, do you have any questions for me or any other staff members?
Any questions for Jake? Yes.
The 5-foot placeholder, but in reality, it's going to be 10 feet if approved the way it is. Is that correct?
It will be, if a variance is granted, it will be whatever council decides on. So that would probably be one question you'd want to clarify with the representatives here.
The drawing shows 10 feet. I much prefer 10 feet.
Certainly. And again, that's totally up to the Board of Adjustment or council on that call. So that would be something that the group can speak to the applicant better than I can.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to clarify, the 5 feet in the memo is not what is being asked for here necessarily. You could decide to do 10 feet, 15 feet. That's the call of the council.
Tom?
Thank you. Can you remind us of what any height restrictions are for property in R2?
Off the top of my head, I am not aware of that. It would not be one that is at question with an off-premise parking lot. But you could, if you wanted to set a height requirement, I think you could do that. In this case, I think it would be somewhat of a moot point, but I'll have to get back to you. I'd need to check our code on what it is for an R2.
And please clarify that this property isn't even owned by Alpha Phi yet.
So no, not at the moment. So, and I believe the property owner is here. Is that the
So
case?
we're
unable to be here. So my understanding, and again, the applicant can speak better to this, is they entered into negotiations with the property owner kind of on the basis that these approvals would be received in terms of a variance and a conditional use for a parking lot.
So there's definitely going to do a parking lot, even though there's a sentence in their petition for variance that, quote, "We would not be able to own the home on this property and continue to rent it." Well, they don't intend to anyway, right?
But those are questions I think better for the applicant. What I can say is just because a variance is granted does not mean the parking lot would need to be built, only that if they did decide to build a parking lot that it would fit inside of these restrictions. This wouldn't say the only thing you can ever do with this lot from now on is create this parking lot.
Rich?
I guess I misunderstood you. If we approve this variance, we can state that it's only for a parking lot, correct?
Yes, what I mean by that is if Alpha Phi receives the variance, gets a hold of the lot, they could decide, I imagine, to build something that would conform with the rest of our code. They could tear down the house, build another house that would still have the front yards. I don't believe that's their intention. What I mean by that is if they decide to build a parking lot or don't build a parking lot and the property changes hands, this wouldn't affect what future neighbors or future owners of the land could do with it.
Understood. Next
Yeah.
question. If in fact they put a parking lot, do parking lot rules apply then to any other parking lot, like lighting requirements, how much lighting there should be and
Off the top of my head, I don't know that we have a lighting restriction. We would have things in our code that would be required in terms of landscaping and drainage, that sort of thing. And the Planning Commission or Council, in giving your approval to a variance, if that's where you decide to go, you could put in conditions like that.
Because I do want it to be lit, and I would like it, prefer it to be downlight, but do we have to, to answer the question, we would have to state that.
That's,
It does say that.
that's actually something that the Planning Commission would be addressing. It would be similar to the
Great.
parking lot that we did for Burger King.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions for Jake?
I've been on this council before, so I'm familiar with variances, but I appreciate your tutorial on that for us to help us understand it. In law, we might call this a slippery slope. The neighborhood certainly might. Have the other neighbors in the area said anything besides the man who would benefit from selling this?
The sorority has voiced that they've spoken to some of the neighbors, but I believe if we're going to get into that, it would probably be better for me to give up the microphone and let the applicant speak about it.
The reason I asked about the height is if this were a 4-floor ramp, you could have 52 parking spaces if you left it at 13.
I think at this point we should let the people speak.
Yeah.
Gladly.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to come up, I want to preface my questions with this. I live in nearby in the neighborhood, and there was an attempt earlier by someone to buy a house, just 2 houses from mine, and tear it down, put up a parking lot, but they found out that they could only get about 14 spots in there. So I don't know whatever happened to that. So this is not the first time this has kind of come before us as an issue. But I'd also like to tell you that I have a niece who is an AFE, and I love her dearly. And I hope the word gets back to her that I love her dearly. And I would preface my remarks with the same love and respect I have for her to you women. There are people in the general neighborhood who would be nervous about more and more parking lots by Greek houses because the university doesn't seem to address this issue, even though they may have plans or not for large areas. So this is the intention to buy the property. At first you want to perhaps reduce this setback by 75%. That's not minimal under our ordinance and our consideration for a variance. Well, okay, part of that could be 40% now. It's still not minimal. It's a big chunk.
At this point, I think it's fair to let the people speak.
Okay, I'll reserve 2 minutes for further questions.
Very good. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for having us this evening. My name is Chelsea Asmus. I am a former Alpha Phi, or I'm an Alpha Phi alumni. I represent the Alpha Phi House Corporation Board. The House Corporation Board is a group of alumni and collegiate representatives that actually manage and own the chapter facility. So we are in charge of keeping our members safe within those facility walls and making sure our structures are sound, and also providing an educational environment for them. So over the course of the last 5 years, my involvement with the House Corporation Board, we have had an emphasis on safety. We've upgraded a lot of our door security. We've also had an emphasis on education, updating our internet system. And we had this amazing opportunity at one of our summer meetings where we saw the 619 property was for sale. And as you know, parking in this 3-block area where Delt goes to Alpha Phi, then across from Pi Phi and then down to Theta, there are quite a few collegiate members living in that 3-block area. 284 is actually the capacity. So you can imagine that stretches out the parking needs into the city streets. And we want to do this parking lot not only to reduce the impact on city streets, but also for the safety of our members. A lot of times they're walking numerous blocks late at night, and that just seems like, this seems like a great opportunity for us to help alleviate some of those safety concerns. We do have an purchase agreement with the property owner with these contingencies. I believe the property's representative is here this evening. He was not able to make it at the last minute, but he is in support. In answer to a previous question, do the neighbors know? We have actually attempted to reach out to all of the neighbors in the surrounding area and talk to them about our proposed plans and get their feedback. And a lot of their feedback has been very supportive, actually. Their biggest question is about increased traffic to the alleyway, which if you look at the plans, we're actually not utilizing the alleyway for entry in this proposed plan. So it wouldn't increase traffic to the alley with this. We'd actually want to have a barrier there, whether that be some kind of fencing or nice landscaping, because there is a house just right directly across the alley from it. So we would like to do this in a way that continues to make us good neighbors. We want to do it nicely, you know, that's why we're talking to city staff, we're talking to you this evening, because we want to do this the right way. With that, I guess I will just open it to your questions.
I would like to clarify something with Jake. If it was a 10-foot, is it still feasible for 26 lots or spots instead of 5?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, it could be 10, 20, 30, whatever. Is 10 still adequate for?
I think that's more of an engineer.
Yeah, I can actually answer that too.
Okay, please.
Our original plan with the 5-foot, I'm just going to overlay this here. I don't know if it can be zoomed in on at all. Thank you. That's good. Sorry, this dotted line here actually shows what the setbacks would be with the 25-foot setback on this side and a 20-foot setback on this side. This lot with the 26 spaces was done with a 25-foot driveway in the middle. This was what we originally proposed with the variance request for 5 feet. Since then, we received feedback from city staff and adjusted that, so this middle area here is now only 20 feet for the middle drive. That's why there's this variance here from our original request for 5 feet to now it's a 10 feet requirement, or, you know, it's adjusted to 10 feet.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to comment on this item?
Sure. My name is Andrea Ronning, and I'm in Maloney Real Estate. And Mark Tipton, who is the current owner of the property, who has rented it it's been in his family for quite some time. It was inherited by him. He is very much in favor of this. and ready to move forward with it. He just could not be here tonight, but he will be in the Planning Commission next week, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Others?
I'm Ann Nelson, and I'm the president of the House Corporation Board. And the only thing I want to add is I'm actually the realtor also working with Andrea on this. And this is contingent on our being able to do the 26 spots. If it's only 13 spots, it doesn't fit our financial ability to do this and make this happen. Our nationals requires that we cannot own another home in this, so we can't buy the property and then rent it out. The only thing we could do from our nationals perspective is to build a parking lot, and the owner recognizes that, and that's why it's contingent on that. At the same time, the home had up to 11 renters in it, and so there were that many more parking spots that were being consumed on the streets for the neighbors. I did make some of the phone calls personally and got very happy reviews from people that we would consider this, and we're hopeful. So,
Thank you.
so that's what I have to add.
Council? It's up to, what would be the recommendation of city?
Well, first of all, to be very specific about how much of a setback variance you'd be granting, and then just kind of our recommendations would be specifying, again, this is just our recommendations, but specifying that this is just for the purposes of alpha fee, and alpha fee only building an off-premise parking lot with these variances. If another owner acquired the property, they couldn't use that same setback variance.
Understood, but what's the recommendation, 5 or 10?
It sounds like the minimum that they need to get this done is 10 feet, so that would be what I would recommend.
That would give you plenty of room then for a sidewalk as well as some grass along the
So
side of the lot?
To clarify on the sidewalk issue, that is something that staff had discussed internally. On this street, nothing on the south side of Cedar has a sidewalk along the street, and so council certainly could require a sidewalk on this portion. There aren't any on the east or west sides blocks of this, so it would be somewhat alone. But that, if you decided sidewalks could be something, staff normally wouldn't probably require that.
Can I have another question, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
While you're here, how far back are the setbacks on the building to the north, on the north side of Cedar, and to the south, the Delta House? Are those 25 feet?
So, off the top of my head, I don't know what those setbacks are. I know what they're required to be, but that doesn't mean that when they were built many years ago, they had the same setbacks. And so, off the top of my head, I can't get you an answer to that. I would have to do more research on that.
And I have no clue what he might say, but I noticed that the owner of the property in the west of there, oh, perhaps not, no. I'm thinking of University Street, never mind. Someone just came in, and I thought he might want to have a say. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about the setback. The height restriction, according to what we could find, is 35 feet.
Yeah, and we just found that as well. So,
This should be all right.
yeah.
Please.
So, based on the fact that staff has recommended against granting this variance, and they are basing that on sort of the determination that this request does not meet our criteria, and this maybe can come from John or maybe from Jim, what's the possible, I guess, consequences of going outside of the criteria that we've set in order to grant it? Because that concerns me a little bit if we're going to ignore the criteria that we've set just because maybe we don't feel like this particular project is necessarily a threat, but it is. We did set them, and it seems like we should be following them.
Well, I'll talk first so I can get the low-hanging fruit, and then John and Jim can get the harder stuff. But what I would say is that if an issue with another, this is something you're not likely, I wouldn't think, with most residential housing to seek to build a larger off-premise parking lot. But other Greek houses, we do know there is one that came to the Planning Commission seeking to build an off-premise parking lot. If this is granted, I think it would get harder to reject those if they wanted a reduced variance for a larger parking lot. There are arguments both ways here. Staff is recommending against it because it doesn't fit in our code. We're in a very awkward position on this one because it doesn't fit our code. We can see the benefits if council decided to approve it. we could see the merits of it both ways. And so we're just posing it to you. In terms of other legal problems, I would have to defer to Jim on those.
John, do you want to weigh in?
I think Jake answered it fairly well. With respect to a couple things, that's why I've suggested if you'd like to grant the variance, that you do it specifically for the sorority. That then further clarifies that it represents the unique nature of this project, that it is for the Alpha Phi Corporation for their parking lot. If at some time in the future they rebuild their house somewhere else and they no longer need this parking lot, the new owner won't receive the same benefit. So you are limiting it to a very specific area. I think when we reviewed the variance history that we've had, there's been at least one other one I can think of where, again, staff reviewed what the scenario was and didn't seem to fit, and council chose to grant that variance for different reasons, not the same sort of scenario here. But that's certainly within the wishes of the council to be able to do that for exceptional situations. So I guess it'd be a little bit more, and then I can turn over to Jim with respect to if he has any legal concerns with that.
The criteria to be followed, it says the following issues are to be considered, each and all of them as determining factors in whether or not the issuance of a variance is justified. And then you have 1, the unnecessary hardship, 2, literal interpretation, 3, it's the requested, the variance requested is the minimum, 4, the granting of the variance will comply with the general purpose and intent of the chapter and will not be offensive to adjacent areas. Not supposed to consider non-conforming use or structures in the same district. And then 6, exceptional and extraordinary circumstances that apply to the property, and it's not by the applicant's making. There's no guidance in the ordinance as to how many of those, such as a majority of those, are needed in order for you to justify the grant of a ordinance. There's no and in there, there's no or. It just says that you have to consider each and every one of them. And so you've got probably a lot of wiggle room on it if you wanted to grant the ordinance. I don't know, there's been no showing by the AFI group as yet as to why they need the additional parking. And that could fit into that exceptional and extraordinary circumstance criteria that you have to consider.
I'm just going to move approval. Maybe strict Alpha, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. Jim can make it clean up here, but move approval to Alpha Phi having 10 feet in each. Is that okay, right?
The other recommendation is that we would, in terms of creation of an off-premise parking lot, just for Alpha Phi for the 10-foot setback.
Okay, we have a motion. Let's have a second before we go over. Okay, we have a motion, a second. Now further discussion. Catherine?
Clarify something that John just said. So John, you said that this variance, if we specify that it's specifically for Alpha Phi, then if they were to vacate that property and somebody else were to take it over the park, and they're already constructed a parking lot there with this variance, would the variance on the parking lot carry over with the parking lot to the new owners, or would the new owners of the parking lot not receive that variance with it and would have to reconstruct it under?
Great question. I should have clarified that. We wouldn't make them remove the parking lot, but let's say that parking lot crumbled and they needed to replace it. Somebody else would have to build it in conformance with that. Or if they were to remove that parking lot and put another house there, they would then lose the variance that you would grant.
Okay. Rich?
Respectfully, I disagree, Jim, because I specifically heard them say that this would allow them to not have to park so far away, which is a safety issue. This would allow less parking on the street, which once again is a safety issue. So I would think those are exceptional things that would fit at least that part of the criteria, because it's already crowded. Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Tom?
It's already crowded on the streets, yes. It's already crowded all over the place. There's a need for parking, I understand that. Again, this is a slippery slope. I don't believe that this meets the variance definition of an owner that can make no feasible or reasonable use of the property. There would still be room for 13 spaces. I'm not sure about the setback of the rest of the neighborhood. I believe we will hear from a lot more people if we let this happen in a neighborhood of houses. And I urge people to vote no on the motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I might interject with just where this, our code does get a little bit different than other measures. In terms of granting a variance, we need a concurring vote of 2/3 of the member of City Council to approve a variance. And so this is 2/3 of the members of City Council, not just those that are present. And so that would take 6 members to approve a variance. Okay. And just to also clarify, we did try to publicize this as much as possible, even going beyond what the code required of us. We signed the property, placed an ad in the paper, and we took the step, even though the ordinance didn't require it, of mailing to all the property owners within 250 feet of this property. So we were certainly trying to make this as open and transparent of a process as possible.
If you go a couple miles north, a couple blocks north of their house on the east side of the street, there's already a large parking lot that the university has there, and I don't see any problems with that. So having had our discussion, we have a motion and a second.
Is that the one shared with the university?
Yes.
Shared with the university.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We'll try this with a voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No. Roll call, please, Don.
We have 5 yes, we need 6, so the motion passed. Next item is old business. Item A, second reading ordinance 1355 to entitle 15 and usage, chapter 155 zoning regulations and section 155.075A. Telecommunications tower, antenna support structure, and wireless communications facilities. To add an exception allowing the City Council to consider the construction of stealth camouflage towers within 300 feet of residential zoning or uses. And John.
Thank you. This is an item that's kind of been discussed a little bit over the last year. I'll just kind of do a short recap of some of the background on it. Last year, the city was approached about the possibility of a telecommunications tower at city-owned property in the corner of Market and Bloomingdale. Sometimes this is known as the Market Street Water Tower site. A review of our city code indicated that it was not possible to build a telecommunications tower there. Our zoning code only allows for telecommunications towers to be constructed on 4 different zoning districts in the community. Our central business district, the general business district, the general industrial district, and the heavy industrial district. I'd also note that there's also a requirement that any cell tower that's located within those 4 zoning districts, there's also a requirement that that tower be at least 300 feet from any residential uses or zoning. Then, the beginning of this year, the city did receive a letter from a telecommunications tower representative working with Verizon Communications about looking at the possibility of an exception to provide for a telecommunications tower within that 300-foot buffer, if you will, around those 4 zoning districts. The City Council sent that to the Policies and Procedures Committee to review and make a recommendation on. The Policies and Procedures Committee directed staff to draft an ordinance that would provide for an exception for consideration and discussion. That then came before the City Council in April of this year, And the city council, once they received that report, since the recommendation would be modifying the city zoning code, they sent that to the planning commission, as zoning ordinances first go through the planning commission before they reach the city council. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of the ordinance with a 5-2 vote. The concern the Planning Commission expressed was that this process would require the City Council to approve a design prior to the Planning Commission acting on the conditional use permit for a telecommunications tower. The City Council did have first reading of this ordinance back in May. I think probably for those who might not be as familiar with it, or just to kind of recap, what is this ordinance? What is Ordinance 1355? Basically, as I mentioned earlier, telecommunications towers are only allowed in 4 zoning districts in the community: central business, general business, heavy industrial zoning, and general industrial zoning. That would not change. Only those 4 zoning districts would allow for the placement of telecommunications tower. What the ordinance does do is it allows for a tower to be located, right now you cannot locate a tower within 300 feet of any 300 feet of residential zoning or uses. So those 4 zoning districts are a little bit more limited than with that 300-foot requirement. And part of this is that we realize that basically the central business district, with the number of downtown apartments we have that are on second floors, we have effectively nothing in the downtown and central business district that would allow for a telecommunications tower. So one of those 4 zoning districts that can have a tower has been eliminated through the zoning that we currently have. This process basically would provide that if the council wanted to allow for a tower within that 300 feet area abutting one of those 4 districts, that they would need to complete an application process. And only a stealth or camouflage type tower would be allowed. The tower notice would be provided to all the property owners within 300 feet of the location of where this tower could potentially go. That would be provided 10 days beforehand. The application with the design, et cetera, would need to be turned into the city 14 days before the hearing so that the public would have a chance to review it prior to the hearing. We did develop a sample application for the council to consider and take a look at and tweak if this is the direction you'd like to go. And then if this ordinance were adopted and if a tower design were approved, then they would begin the typical process of receiving a conditional use permit through the Planning Commission. So that's a little bit about what the tower does. In reviewing this, we really kind of looked at a couple of different issues. One was the need, and I know that we had had some discussion, and I know there's a telecommunications tower representative here that I might be able to address this a little bit better, but with respect to the need for this tower, and they can talk about future needs, but what we experienced just recently with Dakota Days was a very real need. We had situations where our in-car computers would not work for the police department because they were working through the cell cards in the towers, as well as we had an off-duty officer trying to assist an inebriated individual, and they were unable to get some of communications to go through. So during some of those peak times, we had certainly a lot of visitors in the community. We had a very recent real need demonstrated. I would also note that, as I've mentioned probably too many times, but we only allow currently in our code the placement of the tower in 4 different zoning districts. And as I noted, one of those districts has effectively been eliminated, the central business district, with the code the way it is written today. I think the staff concern that was presented back in May, and it's kind of reiterated here again this evening, is we have a community issue with the ability to place the infrastructure that we need in areas of our community, south basically of Cherry Street. Jose's drafted some rough maps, kind of a short notice to kind of show where we would be able to have a tower. And I think what this ordinance would do is provide an opportunity for the council and the community to have a discussion on the placement of the tower. And I think that's effectively what one of our concerns is as this has developed over the course of the last year. Jose, if you want to try to explain, it's kind of a busy map, and it's...
I guess what I was trying to do based on our noon meeting today, we created 2 maps. The first map that you see in front of you would have 3 different colors. The yellow area would be the 300-foot buffer. So anything within that yellow would be 300 feet away from a residential zone area or a residential use. And as you can see, all of the yellow is actually north of Cornell, pretty much north of Cherry Cherry Street. Now, the cyan that you see between the yellow and the dark blue, that would be the 200-foot buffer. So you essentially just move that yellow 100 feet over, and then you start getting closer to residential zones and so forth. Over here in the downtown area, which I have a blow-up of that, there is a 200-foot area in there as well. The dark blue then would be the area that's 100 feet from residential zone. So you can see how that now you start gaining little slivers here and there, little pockets. Same thing in the downtown area. Now you have quite a lot of stuff. And as well below the bluff along the railroad tracks of Vermillion down there. Now, speaking directly regarding the central business district, which is delineated by the red line, there's no yellow down here, so there's no 300-foot areas whatsoever. The only that you would have a little pocket here that would be a 200-foot area, and that's essentially, this is a courthouse block, so it would be the property just south of the courthouse. It's the old eye clinic. Yeah.
It's a psychology business, I don't know. Lewis and Clark.
Yep, so that essentially would cover the area by Lewis and Clark, and then the streets, Austin and Main Street. That's a 200-foot buffer area that you would be able to have. Now, if you look at the 100-foot buffer area, then again, you expand that area considerably, but all of those areas are actually taken up mainly by buildings already and businesses and so forth. You can see over the water tower used to be in this corner over here, and even the 200-foot buffer would actually not fit within that. You would still have to build it either in the parking lot, maybe over here by the National Armory or National Guard Armory and so forth. And so it's kind of I guess it shows what might be available. And this is very rough based on really quick, I don't know, searching of actual residential uses.
What's the southwest part there?
This here?
Yes.
That's just the area that was actually by the railroad. It just happened to fit in this page, so it just came up. But this would be just along the railroad south of the bluff. This would be Kidder, Bloomingdale going down the hill, okay. And then 12th Street down the hill.
So the Senior Citizen Center is in that?
The Senior
area.
Citizen Center would be right here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now with that, somebody in the audience has comments or questions? Are you?
I can address some of this. Once again, my name is Kurt Walter. I do represent Verizon Wireless. Thank you again for having me here. In our last time I was here, didn't have all the answers for you guys. Some questions came up at hearings, and we went back and tried to get as many answers as possible. We hope to have an engineer here. We have delivered an engineering statement as to why we needed better facilities. Hopefully, I'm not sure if everybody's read that, but here we go. This is what we'll get into. The highlights of this engineering statement gets into specifically using our data traffic analysis tools indicates that a significant amount of data usage is originating from the downtown area of Vermillion due to the usage from users that reside, work, or shop in this area. We are reaching a point that will no longer be able to provide adequate data speeds for our customers early in 2019 simply due to ever-increasing data usage. So basically what we have, and we'll get into this map. If I do have a little map here, roughly of what Verizon has at the moment. These two black dots are their current facilities that cover the city. What we're looking at here is not a coverage problem. You can pretty much go anywhere in city and use your cell phone. What we have here is a capacity problem. It's not a capacity problem today. It's a capacity problem that we see in pretty much maxing out our system in 2019. It takes a year and a half sometimes to get federal approvals to build a new facility. So we look at things a couple years ahead of schedule. What this does, we've got this one on the north side, northwest side, and this one's on the university property. What we need to cover is this downtown corridor. That's where our projections are that it's using all the data, using some of the data. We've been asked to provide numbers, more detailed information than that. Can't provide that. That is confidential, proprietary information. It's just not shared. The statement itself that we've delivered to the city should suffice with that. What Mr. Prescott has mentioned about the police, the emergency facilities. I did have a chance to talk with a police chief today to go over some of the items that they had seen over the last couple of weeks. And once Verizon's system reaches capacity, that will happen more often. So something is needed. There has been questions about if we built something below the bluff. We can build a tower anywhere. The building it's not the problem. It's where you build it and what it does. If we go below the bluff, we've got some airport issues. There are certain height restrictions you can have near an airport. But realistically, only 1/3 of our tower would be projected towards the downtown area. And the other 2 would be roughly towards Nebraska. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on here. All of our need is in the city, downtown area. If we put this facility in the downtown area, we can use 2 sectors for the downtown cover, use that facility to its optimal. We'll still have the extra coverage to the south towards Nebraska. Like Ms. Prescott had mentioned, the current restrictions, pretty much there's nowhere else we can go that needs the coverage. We have good coverage, we have good capacity in the areas that we are currently can build a tower. What we need is something downtown. This particular amendment to your ordinance really doesn't change anything. It allows you guys to look at different possibilities. It doesn't say that because the setbacks can be reduced that we can just go in there. It does require your approval of anything that we do less than 300-foot setback. I've done a lot of work in Sioux Falls. They don't have the 300-foot requirements. We've built many stealth facilities near homes. They're building new homes near our facilities, so it doesn't seem to have affected any property values. People are still building homes next to tower facilities. Just doesn't seem to be a problem anecdotally in this local area, in the general vicinity at least, in South Dakota. So, be here to answer any questions I could.
Okay. And so I understand that there are some limitations in the specifics that you can give us, and maybe we just haven't done a great job of communicating what we need or what we're asking for, because I think there was some responses that were sent to you that sort of indicated the things that we were feeling like we were missing, and I think there was a number of us that concurred that was sort of the missing piece, that you're saying that there's gaps, not in coverage, but capacity, and that to meet those gaps, we would need to go forward with this amendment to our code. And if there was just a way to show that beyond saying things like significant, which is very hard to quantify or very difficult to show, especially the public and our constituents, I think that would be really helpful. And so I'm still at the point where I'm not sure if we're ready to vote on this yet, because, and I think I can speak for our colleague who isn't here tonight too, that had sort of expressed this, we just need to be able to see how this particular solution solves the problem you're talking about. And we need to see that beyond just hearing there is a need, it's significant, and this will fix it. We just need to have it expressed or displayed in some way. And that doesn't need to be specific numbers of customers or things like that. My assumption is that because you know that there are gaps in capacity, there should be some way to express that in a way that we could get beyond just your assurance that they exist.
Okay, first off, there are no gaps, so the terminology isn't correct. I mean, it's the idea is there.
Can you tell me what there is? It's not a gap, what is it?
It is a capacity problem.
Okay.
And it happens when we're projecting that our facilities will be full.
But you're saying that because of the placement of the towers, there are parts of Vermillion that are in need of extra capacity or will be at some point that right now can't be met. And so
yes,
my assumption, because we're going through all this, is that the solution will help us meet that.
yes.
And I think that we're just missing the in-between piece that shows how this solution solves that problem. And I think that if we could see that, there is support because we understand the need for our community, that it's important infrastructure, but we just need you to help us be able to explain that to other people, because right now we don't really have a way to express it either beyond Verizon says we need this.
Well, you do have the anecdotal evidence that 911 calls could not be made when there was heavy traffic in town.
Right, and so there's a reason for that, ostensibly,
Yes.
that could be somehow graphically represented or could be explained. I mean, again, we don't have that intermediate step. We've got this thing that happened, and we're saying it's because this doesn't exist, but we don't have the thing that links to the why and how this solution would fix that. And so
I'm
that's
not
what
sure I can
I'm
give
still
that to you.
missing.
Again, it's not my assurance of anything. It's the RF engineer from Verizon that's stating this. So I have no insurance that covers me for assuring you of anything.
I'm mostly asking you so that you can take this back to them, I guess. I understand that you're not going to be
I'm
able
going to have you be very specific, because the things you're asking for, other than an RF statement like this, is proprietary. We can't give you a graph of...
So you can't tell us how you know that you need this?
Other than what it says in the statement, no.
That's very difficult, I feel like, for us to make decisions
I'd like
without
to ask
that.
a little different question. Could you tell me the footprint you need for a tower?
On the ground? Depends on what you want to do. Realistically, we can get...
My question really relates to, why would you have to go less than 300? What's the footprint that you have to have on the ground?
We can get as small as probably 20 by 20 footprint on the ground.
I guess I'm trying to understand then the layout of our areas that wouldn't fit within having a 300-foot, and maybe I'm not understanding enough about what's going on, but I'm confused about the importance of reducing the 300-foot if your 20 by 20 wouldn't fit.
Well, this one pretty much, this map here pretty much shows it, what city staff has come up with. Currently, we have a facility over here somewhere and one here. To build something to meet your codes right now, we can only build here. And that won't help anything for downtown. It won't help any traffic. It'll actually be interfering with what we've got going on. So we can't build a new site that helps us at all in the city of Vermillion. First off, you need to get above the trees. We could go on the roof here, but you can't really get above tree lines and get more than a couple blocks of coverage that would help everybody. You get a lot of shadowing. Any buildings that are sitting there would shadow that. But so the city's current, not yours, but the city's current zoning ordinance won't allow us to build a new facility where the traffic is.
What space do you need? What's the minimum? If 300 is too much, how much would you have to shrink back?
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that one. You guys, as the council, can decide what would be acceptable. All we're asking for this particular ordinance is that if this will give you an avenue to look at other sites that are less than 300 feet.
My question is how much less, I guess, is what is of interest to me.
Each individual one, what we're looking at right now, what we have been talking with city staff about for several months at the beginning of the year, is basically in this area here, which would be 100 feet, if I'm reading the map correctly.
I guess the area that's in question is actually closer to right here, these 3 lots. And there's a portion of that would fall within the 200-foot buffer, or the 100-foot buffer, sorry.
100?
Yeah, the dark blue is 100 foot.
And we're now 300?
Yep.
Yeah, Verizon's not looking to ask you to let us plop something down anywhere we want. That's not the case here. We're just looking to see that you have an avenue that when Verizon comes with a proposal, that you could approve it if you want. What we've been talking about is city property, so the city as an owner can say no. The city as a zoning piece with this amendment can say no. There's still, we're not asking for any real significant change, just an avenue that you can look at a specific site. Without finding a specific location, we've been talking about the water tower location. There seems to be a lot of people that are concerned about that spot. In further discussions with city staff, we thought that we could find a different location. So if the water tower site fits, great. If, as a landowner, you guys don't like the water tower site, find a different site, just fine with us. We need to be somewhere downtown. So once we find a specific location, we would be happy to provide whatever we can. I can go back and see if there's something more data-wise without proprietary stuff. We have been having this discussion for the last couple months with Verizon's corporate people, and this is what they came up with. But
Catherine? Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a couple things that you had brought up. You had said at the beginning that this is not a coverage issue, it's a capacity issue. So you show on the map that there's these 2 sites that you already have the towers, correct? And that those towers are able to have coverage for the whole area, the whole city, right?
yeah, pretty much.
But then you just said that adding another tower would interfere with those first 2 towers?
In that area. If you put them in that 3-foot 100 area, it would interfere with the other towers, so it would be pointless, correct?
Correct. What I was referencing was, we've got 2 sites here. If we put them in something that's allowed right now, it doesn't help anything downtown. It doesn't help the capacity at all, and anything in here would be too close to the one we've already got. It's not going to do anything. It interferes.
If you were to add a tower in a location that's currently zoned appropriately for it, it wouldn't absorb sort of the capacity over here, and then the capacity would go, it wouldn't spread it out, I guess is my question.
You would be pretty much correct, yes. Where the use is needed right now is downtown. We've got a facility at the university. It pretty much covers that. We've got something over here that covers the highway and most of this area. Where our usage is becoming problematic is downtown.
Okay.
So we need to put something downtown.
I guess my question would be, so John, so if we just pass this change of variance under 300 feet, whatever, you still have to come with us with a plan, a tower, right? But we still have other lots of steps. Move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Yes. A motion and a second. Now further discussion. Rich?
Well, first of all, basically, I've read this thing over and over again for several months. I find no issues at all with any of it, with the exception, and once again, they're saying how much square footage do you need? I'm not concerned about that. I think you can build a tower in 5 square feet. What I'm concerned about is the fallout or the damage area. And I need to refer to that the right term because I'm not talking about just Verizon. I'm talking about all companies. You know, if you have a build a tower that's 100 feet tall, I want to guarantee to say it's not going to fall out of that when it falls down for more than 30 or 40 feet. And so I'm asking this in a general principle because, once again, if we approve this thing, if it goes through, this will all be hashed over again to make sure where it goes because it's conditional use. But as a general rule, you build, in this case, you're talking 100-foot tower, 150 feet. What is the fallout?
It could be anything you want.
Okay. So
it can be engineered so strong that nothing can hit it, you know, relatively. Federal requirements require us to be so strong to withstand so much winds with so much ice on it. Some of the stealth models we're looking at, you know, here's your typical flagpole. Here's something else we thought might work, just ideas that we were throwing out there. Here was one we thought might work, but maybe it brings the birds back, and that's not a good thing. But they can be engineered for whatever you require. The manufacturer of the tower itself can produce a statement that says anything like this, if it would fail, it's strong enough to meet X amount of wind resistance, that kind of stuff. If it would fail, any debris would be within a certain radius.
So you're telling me that your company or any other company like this, if I said you have to build it so it never goes out of 50 feet square, you can do it?
Yes. Not me personally, but the manufacturer of the tower, yes.
That's the only issue I have.
It happened. Oh no, we do it all the time.
That's the things, the health issue, the noise issue, the traffic issue, we looked at and researched pretty thoroughly, and they don't apply. There's nothing, since we already had one on the original water tower, and there was never any of these issues. I don't see them increasing, but I definitely see the need for it, and the sooner the better.
Yes, whatever you guys want, it can be part of the conditional use permit, and we will make it, the engineer will build it strong enough.
John, did you have?
Mr. Holland, this was a question that kind of came up in the committee discussion. And so in the draft application that we developed, one of the very first questions under the background information section is to summarize the anticipated fall study range. And then at the end, there is an acknowledgement that an engineer-stamped fall study is required to obtain a building permit. So what I've learned, and one of the questions we asked, is that a fall study would be done specific to a design to a site. And so they, being any tower company, would not provide that until they were looking at a specific design and a specific site.
It's addressed.
Yeah.
First, I'd like to say thank you for coming tonight. And then you were saying that in Sioux Falls, I know this isn't Sioux Falls, but do you know offhand what the requirement is for that setbacks in Sioux Falls?
Okay.
Because you said that it's awfully close to new houses. So I was just wondering how much closer it is there than it is here.
Excuse me, Kurt. Sioux Falls says where a telecommunications tower is located within 300 feet of residential or institutional zoning districts or uses, or a future residential land use designated by the city's adopted land use plan, the minimum distance from the telecommunications tower base to the nearest existing residential institutional structure or building setback line is not less than the proposed height of the tower. So within that 300 feet, the distance is the height of the tower. I have some other ones if you wanted more.
But it's not the property line.
The building setback line.
The building setback line. So we've built one on Cliff. in Sioux Falls on the Lincoln County water location. They're taking down these old water tanks that were there. The rear property setback for the residential area, you can't build anything within 25 feet of that. So that is the setback line for us in the city of Sioux Falls. So they're pretty good. They understand all that stuff. It's the setback is like Ms. Prescott said, but it's not to the residential property line, it's to their setback. So that they can't build a garage where ours could, the height of the tower away.
Go ahead.
Just in the interest of respecting everyone's time, I will say that this is something that we passed out of policies and procedures, which I'm on. I voted for it in the first reading. My inclination is to support it generally, but I've asked some questions and I feel like I can't vote for something having not had those questions asked, because in that case, why did I ask the question in the first place? And so my preference would be to continue to table this so we have more time. If the feeling of the rest of the council is that they want to get this done tonight, I know there are people that have made up their mind and don't need necessarily more information, then we can certainly go forward with the full hearing. I know there's people that want to speak, but on the other hand, if we are going to maybe take more time to study it, I don't know how much more time we want to devote to it tonight if there are other folks that feel the same way I do. And so whether it's now or later, I will make a substitute motion to table.
Second.
And we have people that have taken time to come here this evening. I'm going to allow them to speak.
One more thing, on your suggestion, maybe that's something site-specific. Anything that comes in, it could be brought on an application that's for that reduced setback. Any site-specific things might be able to come up with more information for you, so if that would alleviate
Mr.
any
Mayor?
concern.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. I'm going to let some people in the public speak, please.
Thank you. Steve Bell, 117 Court Street. We're certainly in favor of good communication. We want Verizon Communication to give good service to Vermillion. Did we note, however, one of his statements that was said rather subtly, and this isn't a negative, it's just to clarify. I was hoping one of you would ask about it. What was your name again?
My name is Kurt Walter.
Okay, Kurt, did you say that like 1/3, or did I hear 1/3 of the antennas would be pointed toward Vermillion and 2/3 would be going to Nebraska?
You did hear that, but that's not from our proposed site. I'd be happy to come up there and discuss it.
That was below the train tracks, I believe, what he was discussing.
So you're saying that if you built a tower below where the train tracks are, then 2/3 would be pointed to Nebraska? Is that what we're saying?
That's why.
Okay, let's take your time, please.
I'm just trying to discover what he actually said, because if 1/3 of the capacity or the radio frequency is going to be devoted to hitting downtown Vermillion, that's of interest, but it should also be of interest to the council to discover what their real intent is. I'm not trying to be negative, I just want to know, is the real intent behind Verizon's endeavor to better service Nebraska, which they're entitled to, or is the intent?
I don't know that that's germane here, because nowhere did he talk about servicing Nebraska. What he talked about is if you didn't put it at a place where it would broadcast to the north, then it wouldn't be helping the downtown area. I did not see him saying that 2/3 of their resources will be into Nebraska. I didn't hear that at all.
Oh, did you mention Nebraska?
Yes, I did.
I just want clarification.
Okay.
I don't know what he said.
Anyone else? Please. Just a minute. Behind you.
All right. Sharon Gray, 32 East Bloomingdale, so just down the street from where the former water tower used to be. I want to reiterate that the idea of putting a cell tower in an historic district is of great concern to me. Now, I personally am opposed to the concept of a cell tower, stealth or otherwise, because of health reasons. I know that you and I, none of us, are federally allowed by federal law to have that be a reason that we are concerned about the situation of a cell tower in an area. We're not allowed to do that, but we are allowed to do it only on the grounds of aesthetic purposes. And in this case, anything, even a substitute, redo of the water tower is not in line. All historic pres standards say you don't make replicas and kind of pretend that they're the real thing. We've lost the water tower, that's gone, God bless it, it's gone. Building something else in its place to look like it would not be positive. But more importantly, putting a cell tower in an historic district when you have some other places where you might be able to get it. In fact, one of my concerns is why, and I don't want to say this in a mean way, but it's going to sound mean. I have been with Republic Wireless for years, and so I've been using Sprint towers. I got tired of not having good coverage, and so I went with Pure Talk, which uses AT&T towers. AT&T towers, miraculously, I now don't have my dead zone on Highway 29 anymore. I understand that cell towers have an agreement to share capacity. My concern is Verizon looking out for Verizon, or is Verizon looking out for us? And if Verizon is looking out for Verizon, I understand that, but then we need to be thinking, I'm wondering, are there some AT&T towers around that Verizon just doesn't want to pay for capacity on and would rather have their own tower? So I think we need to look into that. I think that that's a legitimate concern, a legitimate thing to ask. I understand the need for good wireless capacity. My lands, I work in IT, I get that. But I am not convinced that putting a tower in that location is the right solution. So thank you very much.
Harry?
I didn't know about
Harry,
this.
would you, for the record, please give your name and address?
What? Harry Skolton. Vermillion is my address. I have two places there. One of it is the house I have in Austin Street. So particularly a tower at the old water tower site would be of great interest to me. When I found out the meeting, I at least took an hour on the internet and looked up cell tower safety. And I learned a couple things that I think should at least be taken into consideration. One, that most of the standards of setback were made on the basis of 30 minutes and maybe a year study. So they're not inaccurate, but when you go to longer studies, you get a completely different view. So for instance, the setback from a school where people are mandatorily there for a length of time is almost 1/4 mile if you look at the recommendations for education. The setback for human beings that sleep or work in an area is at least 400 feet. That's minimum. Within that circle, you're going to start getting very, very serious health problems over a long period. It doesn't kill you today or tomorrow, but you get all these problems, and actually even cancer once you get beyond the 3 years. So people in that circle, every site I went on the first page of Google had slightly different, but all of them agreed that about 400 feet is the minimum distance for any continuous living. Well, that circle around the old tower site has a lot of people within that circle. And most of the sites were much higher. The European testing, it was more like 400 meters, which is a lot more than 300 feet. So if I put my glasses, I can just give a couple numbers. The one for schools would 1/4 mile minimum. Mobile towers, 1 square kilometer minimum safety setback for continuous any living thing in that area will be affected in some degree. I believe this was an Israeli study. 3 times the cancer risk, but that doesn't show up until maybe 3 to 5 years after the tower. So the testing that's done in the 3-year period, they look good. But when you get to extended studies like some of the European studies, you find severe increases. There was, let me see the Israeli study, it was within 3 years, they were starting to see 3 times the cancer rate. The closest distance was 120 meters, and that's like 400 yards instead of 100 or 200 feet. But these are biological impacts from the radiation. So what I'm really trying to say is I really beg you to have some people look at the health information involved over a long term when you're talking about the setback. I mean, I would personally not be safe to spend long periods of time in my own house if you came in and put the tower where the water tower was. I'd have to find another place to work and live because I read. So I just beg you to really consider this extremely carefully because there's considerable health. Now, the kind of thing that happened 5 to 10 years, which are very hard to prove, but when they document it against controls, you get things like sleep problems, insomnia, headache, depression, fatigue, tiredness, even dermographism, where you scratch your arm and it turns red. All this stuff shows up downstream. It doesn't show up in the first 3 years. But if you do a 10-year study, it all shows up. Okay, I thank you very much for listening. I would recommend that you extend the boundary instead of reduce it and not make this exception.
At this point, I'm going to accept your motion, if you will do it, please.
My motion would be to table the second reading until which time we have more information.
This is a substitute motion, is that correct?
This is a substitute motion, correct?
Okay. Jim, is that appropriate?
Yeah, I think it could be called substitute motion or a motion to table, but it's precedence over the main motion to have to be substituted.
So which way you want to do it? Table?
It's my motion to table.
In a second, okay. I don't think is that debatable, Jim? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, we have a motion to table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Table. Thank you all for participating. I didn't have to remember to do a roll call on that. Moving on to, let's see, is this B? A second reading of ordinance 1363, zone change to exclude from general business district and include in residential district R3, lot 4, block 5, and lot 2, block 6, and the west 185.5 feet of lot 1, block 5, Partridge Addition, City of Vermillion, Clay County, South Dakota, and they exclude from the R2 residential district and include in R3 residential district, lot 3, block 5, and lots 1 and 2, block 7, Partridge Addition, City of Vermillion, Clay County, South Dakota. Jose.
Thank you. I'll try and make this short and sweet, I guess, but
take what you need.
All right. I guess this item was discussed at the previous council meeting. That council meeting, which was held on October 2nd, no comments against the proposed rezone were voiced, and the council meeting set today as a public hearing date. or its second date, I guess, of the ordinance amendment. This item as well was discussed at the September 25th Planning Commission meeting. At that meeting, the meeting actually was attended by the applicant and one of the neighbors. The neighbor expressed approval of the rezone and for the possible development of apartments and in the area as well. The main questions brought up at that Planning Commission meeting by the Planning Commission itself actually had to do with drainage along Highway 50. After discussion of the item, the Planning Commission approved unanimously or recommended unanimously approval of the rezone. The property that we're discussing, to be more specific, is this area here that's bounded by the thick black line. Currently, this here is general business as well as this part, and this here is R2. It is on the north side of Cottage. Here would be Highway 50. Walmart would be over here. This would be the Prairie Eye Clinic. And then there's a hotel, Holiday Inn, I think, if I remember correctly, right in this location. This area, as you can see, is zoned differently from what they're asking. They're asking for it to be rezoned to R3. Currently, there is R3 that was recently rezoned that, so it is adjacent to an R3 zone, so it wouldn't be spot zoning. Just as a reference, this is the same area that was highlighted in the previous map, and it shows the area is actually undeveloped at this point. I know that the current owners, which are present, have been marketing this area for development for several years, and they have been having some issues, I guess, developing it the way that they would like to see it developed or built at. At this point, the city's cost will be publishing of the ordinances if adopted by the public. Or if adopted, administration recommends approval of the second reading of ordinance 1363. Due to this being the second reading, roll call is required.
Thank you, Jose. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Seeing none, turn it to council.
Mr. Mayor? As pointed out by the city engineer, one of the bigger issues in this entire area is drainage. And as long as that's going to be addressed, it has been discussed by the Planning Commission and will continue to be monitored in our future development, especially in that area where, once again, I'll say it, I used to hunt ducks. We know. With that, I move approval of second reading of ordinance 1363.
Second. Motion and a second. This is a roll call vote, so Don, if you please prepare the machinery. Okay, we have 8 yes and 0 no's. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Not your patient patience. Item new business 8A, first reading of ordinance 1364. That's 8C.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please don't add another one. Let's try new business. First reading of ordinance 1364 to amend Title 7 Traffic Code, Chapter 70 General Traffic and Parking Regulations, Section 70.072 to clarify when parking is not permitted in alleyways and to utilize the defined term alleyway in Section 70.02 and 70.077. And Addison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recently, the administration has received requests from local law enforcement to review the legal language in Title 7 Traffic Code, Chapter 70, General Traffic and Parking Regulations, specifically in sections that are intended to describe the legality of alleyway parking. Upon completion of this revision conducted by City Attorney Jim McCullough, it has been found that our legal language is indeed ambiguous in regard to the legality of alleyway parking as currently written. With the intent to dispel further misunderstandings between community members and local law enforcement, a proposed amendment, drafted by staff and revised by City Attorney McCullough, has been written to explicitly prohibit the actions of stopping, standing, or parking any motor vehicle in any alleyway except to load or unload or receive or deliver from the vehicle for a period of time not exceeding 30 minutes, provided, however, the Chief of Police may authorize time periods when necessary in special instances. The proposed amendment would also revise the aforementioned sections to replace the term alley with the defined term alleyway in the definition section of Title VII Traffic Code, Chapter 70. The issue was presented to City Council as an educational item during the October 2nd, 2017 special meeting. At this time, City Council recommended staff to pursue changes to the traffic code to clearly identify the issue and clarify the issue. There are no financial considerations to be made, and the administration recommends approval of the first reading of Ordinance 1364.
Thank you, Edison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't see anybody here in the audience, so let's turn to the council. Motion and second to approve the first reading of Ordinance 1364. Any further discussion? Tom?
Does this relieve parking of large delivery trucks in the middle of streets such as Main? In other words, are the alleyways behind the establishments that those trucks deliver to, without stating a certain brand?
Right.
Can they make their deliveries in the alley, or are they still going to be in the middle of the street?
Of course. That would be covered in Section 70.077, loading and unloading. And that is defined if they have access to an alleyway, then they are allowed to use that. If they do not have that access, then it would be defined by a loading or unloading zone as defined by the city.
I understand that. Is it practical to deliver to the rear instead of being on the middle of the street? That's what the word is that you have here under 70.077. But if the loading, receiving, or delivering can be made to the rear of the building where it's practical, well, that's my question. Are the rear of those establishments practical for such delivery, or will the trucks remain on Main Street? That's all.
I would think that the practicality of that would be determined by the business itself, and if not, it would be determined by the city. As far as I would know, it would be a specific instance probably where it would be determined if it were practical or not practical.
Any further discussion?
Yes,
Jose, please.
Regarding to that specific question, on Main Street specifically, we try and ask the truckers, I guess, whoever's going to be delivering, to use the alleyways where it's practical, like the ordinance says. Now, we do have some situations, some instances where the alley might be 10 feet wide, more specifically by our pizza. So in that instance, in the winter, it's completely unpractical for them to use that alleyway. In that case, they actually do go to Main Street, and because of that and other issues, as far as it's too narrow, and then other times they can't make the turn, whatever the case might be. So they do stay on Main Street because of those reasons.
Other questions? Do we have a motion or anything?
There's a motion and a second.
Oh, okay. Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Item B, permit for consumption but not sale on Thursday, October 26, 2017, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. for Vermillion Area Farmers Market on the fairgrounds east of High Street and south of Cherry Street. And Mike, please.
The farmers market, again, is looking to have a permit for consumption but not sale of alcoholic beverages for their last outdoor farmers market for 2017 growing season on Thursday, October 26th from 3 to 7. This would be on 4-H grounds east of High Street, south of Cherry Street. The state statute provides that the City Council may permit consumption but not sale of alcoholic beverages on property owned by the public. And this is city property that's leased to the county and subleased to the Clay County Fair Association. The Fair Association has indicated they do not have any issues with the request. This request has been made in previous years, and there has, to my knowledge, there's been no issues raised from that. Administration recommend approval of this permit unless something else is brought forward.
Thanks, Mike. Council?
Move approval.
Motion is second to permit it. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now, Tom. 8C. We have before you this evening a State Transportation Commission. And John, if you want to take that one for us, please.
Sure. Late this afternoon, Jose received an email from the state. I'll just kind of read it. The State Transportation Commission is meeting to discuss proposed speed rule change to reduce the speed limit on South Dakota 50 from 55 miles per hour to 50 miles per hour. I believe that public hearing is on Thursday, October 26th. That's my wording, not the state's. Our Operations Support Office in Pierre asked me, the engineer from DOT, to check to see if we can receive concurrence from the city to the proposed speed rule change. They would like this concurrence before this Thursday morning. I apologize for lateness in adding this in the agenda, but unless you want to have a special meeting to discuss it, we could, if this is something the council supports, have a motion. We could provide the DOT with the excerpt of our minutes which show that the council was in concurrence with reducing the speed from 55 to 50.
So, go ahead.
I would support reducing it quite a bit further, but in order to support, I think, what's a positive change, I would move approval of providing this concurrence. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second and further discussion. Tom?
I have a question. I don't want to put Mr. McCullough on the spot, but what's the difference here between a concurrence and an actual vote? I mean, I would rather hear what's presented at the public hearing rather than a number that was provided, because I agree, chances are some of us would prefer it to be lower. Although I have no facts to base that on, I'd like to hear those facts from an engineer. So is concurring agreeing? Can we? I'd like an opinion on that, if you will.
Concurring would be supporting the proposed change from 55 down to 50, sort of like a resolution of support for what the DOT is proposing to do.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I can talk as far as engineering lingo. We did actually receive, not included with that email, but prior to that email being sent, the DOT did actually send us a brief report on the speed study that they have to do in order to suggest reducing or increasing the speed limit along any highway. Along with that speed study, what they did find out, and I'll just read really quickly from it, spot speed study conducted in 2015 indicated that an 85 percentile speeds of 55 miles per hour and 58 miles per hour, they had a couple of them done in this area. The proposed speed limit of 50 miles per hour is 5 to 8 miles per hour less than the 85th percentile, which is typically what you go in if you're going to be lowering the speed. However, the proposed 50 mile per hour speed is commensurate with the average speeds of 50 and 53 miles per hour, respectively. So there is actually a way of doing this. You actually have to do speed studies. And typically once you do the speed study, you figure out what the 85th percentile is, and that's what the populace, I guess, whoever's using the highway typically tends to go to. So it's actually unsafe to drastically reduce it. You don't want to go from 55 to 30, even though the notion might be that it's safer because you're going slow. Well, no, everybody thinks everybody's going to want to be going 50, and then you're going to be causing accidents. But at the same time, you don't want to go from 55 to 80 because you also have the opposite. Now you have everybody going 50, and you have a sign that says 80 miles an hour. So everybody's going to still want to go 80, and you're going to have backups and so forth and accidents. So there is thought behind the 50 mile an hour. Now, that's not to say that after 5 years that another study's done and that another speed study's done and maybe the 85th percentile at that point, maybe it is 35, I don't know. But it's all going to vary depending on growth and usage of the highway and volume and capacity and much of other stuff.
Well, it seems we already have, coming in from the east, we have 70, 55, 45, 35. Yep. Once we hit a city street, Cherry Street, which used to be called Highway 50.
Sure.
And on the opposite end, north-south, we have Stanford, and unless somebody has changed that, I believe that's still 45 miles an hour. between Cherry Street and Highway 50. So it seems that 45 might actually be more consistent to the driver until they get back out of Vermillion.
And the 45 on the curve as you come in, that has to do mainly with the curve as well.
Yeah.
There's all of those curves are
Time
designed.
to leave it at 45 till you hit Highway 19.
According to the way people are driving, it's not needed. It's 45. It would be too slow. So.
According to an engineer's educated opinion and study.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have no bid openings. John, city manager's report in 30 seconds or less.
Got it. The Police Emergency Communications Department, they will have their annual open house. It'll be on Saturday, October 28th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Public Safety Center, kind of the west side of the courthouse. It is free and open to the public, and in particular, we encourage the youth to wear Halloween-themed costumes as they have an opportunity to kind of trick-or-treat through there. Fire hydrant flushing began today and will last until approximately October 27th. There's sometimes this is routine maintenance, and sometimes you have a temporary discoloration of the water in the immediate area. And finally, included in your packet was a raffle notification. St. Agnes is selling $1 raffle tickets until the drawing at their Fall Festival on October 29th. The prizes are donated and range in value between $50 and $500, and the proceeds from the raffle benefit St. Agnes Church and School. How they do?
Since there are no questions for our city manager, we'll move on to individual invoices payable. Mike, any questions? Trump?
Move to pay our bills.
Second.
Motion is second to pay our bills. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. No consensus agenda, and Steve's not here. Somebody's going to have to fill in. Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're adjourned. Thank you.